All right, welcome everyone to another edition of Manufacturing Growth Talks. I'm your host, Burgos, president of Alphanova Consulting, and I am joined by Scott Heemstra. He is a veteran in the manufacturing space, and he's going to share with us his story, his background, some of the lessons he learned. And as you've heard from other episodes, we're here to just have a conversation, understand and learn from our peers, and draw some lessons that'll help you drive the profitable growth you're looking for. So with that said, Scott, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Excited to have the conversation.
Absolutely. So let's start with for those that aren't familiar with Scott, can you tell us, Scott, a little bit about your background and what your experience has been, just for those who haven't are familiar with your background.
Sure. Went to school at the great Iowa State University for industrial systems and manufacturing engineering, and I got into that because I was just really intrigued by and enamored by the overall process that comes with an organization and how everything has to fit together in order for it to work. And I just was really intrigued by that. And so, yeah, graduated and landed at a paint company called Diamond Vogel Paints. In my first role, started in the computer department, writing software for the manufacturing and research and development teams, and eventually realized they realized I'm a terrible computer programmer,
Oh
and
no.
eventually moved into overseeing the operations of the company. And so Diamond Vogel is a regional paint manufacturer with 8 manufacturing facilities and about 9 distribution centers. It's in the chemical industry, so it's somewhat regulated or pretty heavily regulated in a lot of ways. And so yeah, that experience was fascinating and very enjoyable. And then my last stint was with a fastener company, and they're a master distributor of fasteners and a manufacturer of fasteners. So they manufactured machine keys and clevises, and so that got me exposed to metal and that industry, and it was a pretty fascinating shift to go from mixing batches
Oh,
of
sure.
liquid and stuff to dealing with metal and steel and all of that. But what I learned was at the end of the day, it's about people and process. And the mechanism of how you lead really doesn't change. It's just what you use to talk about it. So,
You hit a very good point. It's about people, it's about helping them be successful and supporting them in that endeavor, right?
right, right.
So
Absolutely.
tell me,
And yeah,
oh, sorry, go ahead, please.
no, and what's been fun to see is just how everybody's on that learning journey and trying to get better and trying to do a good job, and how do you draw that out of people?
For sure, for sure. So let's go a little bit deeper in memory lane. So you started programming, right? And then you transitioned to operations. Can you help us understand how, or envision how were those early days in that transition? Like what were your roles? What were you doing? And how was that like? Because I'm sure programming is very different than operations. How was that time for you?
Yeah, that was quite the journey. I started working with our maintenance team and on some projects and stuff like that. But honestly, I was more so busy with trying to finish handing off my computer IT responsibilities. And then was given responsibility for one of our manufacturing plants where there was a leadership issue. And
Oh,
so,
wow.
yeah, that was jumping in with both feet let's just say that. And so we had significant cultural problems there, process problems, and the leader himself was not really wanting to be the leader. He just wanted the title. He wanted to be the boss, but not necessarily
Oh,
lead. And
interesting. So you're
yeah,
talking about at the plant manager level or some
right.
other? Okay,
Yep.
got
Yep. And
it.
so that was my first termination as a young leader, was one
Wow.
of those. And that man, that was a good learning experience through that. But at the end of the day, it helped me realize and my mentor Drew Vogel taught me this: you either change people or you change people. And I was not successful in helping that person see that there's a better way to do things. And so we had to make the tough call and make a change.
Yeah, that I mean, I gotta tell you that highly commendable when you're young and starting and you have those kinds of challenges. Those are things that shape you as a leader, your character. So I'm curious, as you were navigating that, what was that? I feel like a lot of times interacting with leaders in manufacturing, we want to give people an opportunity to redeem themselves, to turn things around, to prove that they are capable. How, how was that for you? Like, how did you navigate that to where you said, I think we're past the point of we can turn this person around. How did you navigate that decision?
Yeah, in this case, that person made it really easy because he made a really dumb mistake in judgment, and it was just unforgivable. And so, you know, it it made it easy to make that call. Um, what I've found over the years since then is trying to discern when people aren't making progress, why is that? Is it a competence issue that they understand, or
Mhm.
is it a stubbornness issue where they just don't want to? And trying to navigate that, and hopefully it's just a technical or a competence issue, because the right person can learn
Right,
at that point.
right.
But if they're just stubborn, then they're unhappy with something in their life anyway, and so better off just helping them to figure out how to be happy in life and in a more fulfilling role.
Agreed. That's a very good way to put it. So, I mean, sounds like that was somewhat of a challenging situation diving in, like right off the bat, you landed into something, you had a challenge. So help us understand how are you able to turn that around? You started with changing that leader. I'm sure there were, reactions from people that sends a message. How did that all progress? How did that whole situation unravel?
Yeah, I had no idea what to expect because I was young and dumb at the time. But I hired a very non-traditional leader. It was somebody who didn't come from the paint industry. It was a female leader, um,
Interesting.
and that was very rare at that time.
Yeah.
But she had all of the right soft skills, the right qualities, the right mindset, and I was hopeful that she'd be able to learn all the technical side of things. What was interesting was we turned every position over in that plant twice, two times, before we started to be able to move the needle on culture.
Wow. Hold on. We gotta dig into that. You said you turned over every position in that factory twice, not once, twice before
Yeah,
you were able to turn around that plant.
yeah, and that included the frontline supervisors as well. And what happened was, as Karen and I looked at it and kind of debriefed it at the end, it was we realized we were counting on the existing employees to train the new employees. And
Okay.
so those bad employees train the new employees the way they do it. And as we were trying to make changes, they were the first resistant ones, the existing
Okay.
employees, but then the first replacements weren't quite getting it either. And so as they trained the next person, they didn't train all of the bad habits, just part of the bad habits. And by the time we got to that second or third person, we had eliminated the bad habits.
Wow, good. Wow, that's I mean, just your first experience going into operations, that had to be challenging. So uh, I don't even know how to think about this, because in my mind I'm thinking you have to have some level of courage and some support for you to make the decision to replace that many employees in a company. I think I've only seen that once, and in my experience working with clients. How tell us about the thought process from the top, the support you had, the courage you had to have, because I think a lot of times manufacturing leaders out there are hesitant to make a switch, even if they know that's not the right person, even if that person is damaging to the culture, and they feel they need to get rid of that person, but somehow that person has somewhat of a hold of the company because of their technical knowledge of some, or maybe their legacy, or maybe fear of retribution. Can you break that down for us? Like, how was that unity? How was that support, the thought process, the courage to even do that? Hopefully, understanding my question.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
and you hit the nail on the head because it's so multifaceted and
Mhm.
interconnected in so many ways. And I got to give a lot of credit to Drew Vogel for mentoring me through that. I remember one time I was meeting in his office. It was on the second floor, and we were talking about how to deal with all of this. And he had me stand up and look out the window, and
Okay.
his window looked out over the parking lot.
Okay.
And he said, every single one of those cars represents a family. And we're providing the opportunity for that employee to provide for their family. And so that means as leaders, we have the responsibility to make sure that we have the courage and make the tough decisions to ensure that this company is going to be here 5 years from now so that employee can still provide for their family. And so he had he provided all of the support that I needed. And it really came down to Karen and myself. Karen was the plant manager. And what we did was we attacked it by making sure we understood that we had consistent processes. We involved support people like research and development chemists to help us understand what's going on and to be able to wade through the excuse making and all of that. And the technical aspect was just one aspect of it.
Sure.
They and because they, like you said, wanted to hold that tight to their chest. Well, if people have that mindset, they don't have a safety mindset. And so as we were trying to improve our safety record there, because we were experiencing an injury about once a month that was an OSHA recordable injury,
Yeah.
as we tried to move the safety culture, that was often the way that those folks exited themselves out, was because they didn't want to commit to the soft side of things. And therefore the technical side of, hey, I know this, nobody else does, wasn't a topic of discussion.
Right. That's great. And it's so important to have that support from the top. I always say it. If the people at the top are not on board, you are going to have a hard time having a transformational impact. Maybe localized, you'll be effective, but at a business level, or organizational level, it's a very uphill battle, I find.
Yeah, and it the challenge is how to balance compliance versus sustainability. And You can threaten or jump up and down or intimidate and gain compliance with something. But if you want it to be lasting change, then you've got to make these cultural changes so that they're sustainable. And that, to me, I found that starts with relationships first and having good relationships, and then painting a picture or a vision of where we're going towards. And those that buy into that are going to be easy, and those that don't will will figure it out, get off the bus, and find a better spot that's a better fit for them.
Right. Good. Like what you said, right? You want to help them envision the future so they can choose for themselves where they want to go or if they want to fit into the culture. That's really good. So, all right. So you had a lot of change. You were going. Oh, sorry. You want to say something else?
Nope, nope.
Okay. So that. So I mean, you turned over the facility twice. My gosh. How do you? So you had Karen, you mentioned her name. How do you make sure that your vision, that level of consistency, that level of focus stays consistent as levels below you are engaged? And I'll preface it by saying that uh, that culture is so driven by the leaders. There's stewards of that culture, and so if there's inconsistency, if there's no, some level of hesitancy or not buying into your message, that message might be broken or might be ineffective. So how do you maintain that so that the message is effective in changing the culture?
Yeah, and that goes back to what I said earlier. To me, it starts with relationship. You got to have a great relationship with your direct reports and with their direct reports as well. Um, I worked with somebody who was really wise. He always taught me 2 levels down, 2 levels up. You got to have great relationships with 2 levels down and 2 levels up from yourself. And so it starts with that relationship and then having great conversations and being able to define clearly, here's our preferred future state. Here's where we are now. We want to get to here. And if we aren't intentional about moving from here to here, we're going to get to a default future, which is going to be down here. And we don't want that. So
Exactly.
let's go to this, and then let's figure out what are mile markers that we can put in there to make sure that we're making progress. Because that's not going to be a straight line
Oh,
from
for sure.
current to future. There's going to be challenges, roadblocks, hurdles that we got to go through. And to me, I found if you have a great relationship and you can paint the vision, then you let those who are closer to what's happening, they'll figure out how to ensure you've got great culture and consistency through that.
Right. So, I mean, this sounds all amazing. I know you had to have some setbacks along the way. Can you talk about maybe one or two setbacks that were significant that gave you some pause, and how were you able to overcome them?
Yeah, I had a situation where had a person that was a great fit from an alignment with our values and morals, culture. But from a technical standpoint, they struggled to pick it up.
Oh, okay.
And the technical side of that struggle was hindering the the overall organizational progress in that one site that they were at and impacting all the other sites as well. And so I had to step back and figure out how to be more creative at setting that person up for success. And I went through that evaluation of, are they capable and do they have the right attitude? Well, this person had the right attitude and right approach, and I thought they were capable, but I wasn't positive. And so put several different ways to invest in them in place, and they figured it out and turned it around. Now, the setback was that it took a lot longer than what those above me were hoping for and
Okay.
expecting. And uh, and it was us figuring out, do we want sustainable success or quick success?
So,
And that was a good moment for me personally to figure out how do we reconcile that and to make sure. I was seeing progress through there, but they weren't seeing the results at, at the end quite yet. And I was very confident that we were close, and we were. We were within 60 days starting to see that shift that we were looking for.
that's great. Let me unpack a few things. I think you said a few things that are so powerful and so needed in our industry. So, for first and foremost, you took responsibility for this leader and for making them successful and for continuing to invest in them. I guess from my experience, that I don't see that often, that level of
Yeah.
ownership and support and commitment to your employees. So kudos to you. I applaud that.
Thank you.
And then the other thing is having that long-term view as opposed to that short-term view, whereas quick results versus sustainable results, which is so key. And so for you listeners, listen to this because it's important. It may take longer, but in reality, in the long term, you're gonna have something that's sustainable, that sticks, and it's effective, and it's more than going to pay for itself. The effort and investment you made.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. If you want something to be sticky, it takes more time because and you have to invest more in it. I mean, that's true in life of anything. The more time you
Sure.
invest, the better the results.
Yeah. And okay, so man, we've unpacked this one. It's been so juicy. And let me ask you this: what lessons as a leader did you, draw from that experience? I'm sure it must have been full of insights and things that helped you grow as a leader going forward, going out, past that.
Yeah, that that experience really helped me to figure out the difference between compliance and what I call the flywheel or the long-term sustainable and also how much I value seeing progress in people, in process, and and I realized I didn't do a great job of communicating that from there as well. And so, and at the same time, I learned that I need to do a better job of clarifying expectations up front as well to make sure that um, we achieve the results in the time frame that somebody is expecting. So yeah,
That's good. So, okay, so that was a strong experience. You probably have the scars to show for it. So, can you walk us through what continued? What was the next phase of your journey?
sure. So it there were a few principles that I've learned over the years that have really shaped how I lead. And I've mentioned the importance of relationships. But when I think about a team of leaders or that inner circle that I work with, one is, and I'm a big John Maxwell fan, so I've
Oh,
I've
sure.
learned a lot from him over the years. One is the law of respect, and just appreciating that we all bring different strengths and skill sets, and that if we can appreciate that as a team, we're going to be much stronger. And that's one of the things that I think that's it. I use the symphony as an example of that frequently. Of you know, we're all playing different instruments, but when we all play it well, we make beautiful music. And so just because I might be somebody with a title doesn't mean I'm more important than somebody who's applying labels to the product. We're both just doing something different. And how do we value and respect each other? And so that's been one of the principles. Um, the second one is the law of the buy-in. And how do we make sure that we're all in tune and understand and agree on that vision of where we're going? And then, yeah, valuing daily progress, valuing steps, and not just expecting breakthrough improvements every day, but valuing packing and stacking continuous improvement, incremental improvements on top of each other. And pretty soon you get that compounding effect.
Sure. That's really good. Let me ask you this. When you're working with other leaders, we all have our different backgrounds and experiences. How do you pick who's going to be a good team member for you? Who's going to be possibly even a good leader? Well, what do you look for in those people?
Yeah, I have become much more throughout my career tuned in to the soft skills. What's their interpersonal communication skills? Do they have the humility to admit that they're not wrong? If there's somebody that has to be the smartest person in the room, it's probably
Hmm.
not going to work. Um, and one little trick I use is I often sort of use a mental timer when we're in a group setting. And the mark of a great team is that over time, everybody talks about the same amount of time. And if somebody is over talking everybody else, I recognize that that's probably not going to give us our best result. And so I watch for that. I watch for how do they treat people? How do they have the humility to admit that they might not know as much as the person that's running the machine on the floor, and to value that person and to learn from them. Because so often you can solve any problem if you just ask the person that's within 6 feet of that problem.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
yeah, and so as leaders, that's the type of person I'm looking for, type of person that's hungry, type of person that well, I had a friend named Kurt who always said, is the glass half empty or half full? And he said, I really don't care. I just want somebody who's thirsty.
Oh, nice. That's a good way
Yeah,
of putting it. Yes.
yeah. And so that passion and that desire has to come through in the leaders.
So let me ask you this, Scott. So think about a little bit on the strategic level, right? You're trying to get the business to a specific place in terms of growth and how do you help people in the mid levels and the front lines understand? Because sometimes there's a disconnect between financials and strategic terms that may not translate well. How do you help people bridge that gap so they understand the direction and how it impacts and how they contribute to that vision?
Yeah, I believe in deploying that through the natural leadership chain that's already there. So if you go back to the principle of two levels down,
Sure.
and I need to be communicating to one and two levels down and making sure that there's understanding there. And then that level, that leader that's one level below me has to do that with two levels below them. And so every leader is hearing it, once from one manager and then a second time from another manager. And so they're hearing it two different ways. And to me, I found that's the best way to kind of matriculate it out, deploy that vision, that direction, or that communication out. Um, that doesn't always work perfectly. And sometimes you just need to have a plant meeting and talk with everybody at once. But I think the key there is to just don't get into the weeds so much, keep it higher level, um, but in a way that everybody at least understands from a high level, and then again, follow up through the leadership chain.
Okay, that makes sense. So I know that you have a lot of experience from the paint industry. one of the things that I know we talked about off camera was, and I'm going to get a little operational now, is the high mix, low volume type of environment. How are you able, what are some of the challenges in that environment that you experience, and then how are you able to overcome them? How are you successful in that environment?
Yeah, and honestly, in my experience at Hewitt with the fastener machining as well, that too was also a high mix, low volume. And you know, I as I was learning lean manufacturing concepts and trying to help the organization improve, I read something that used McDonald's as an example, and the idea was mass customization. And so
Okay.
how do you mass produce in a customized format? And McDonald's was a simple analogy to use that. You can order a burger at any McDonald's in the US, have it prepared the way you want. No salt with or without ketchup or mustard or pickles or onions. And
Right.
yet it tastes the same whether you buy it in Florida or in Seattle, right? And so from a operations standpoint, that really triggered with me as a great word picture of, okay, how do we set the systems and the processes up to be like a tree chipper where you're feeding all this variation in to the process, but the process itself deals with all that variation in the inputs and creates a very consistent output. And that's the magic of it, is how do you create the systems and the processes as you bring together people, equipment, materials, methods and processes, um, in the environment. How do you minimize variation across all of that, um, so that even though Formula A and Formula B or SKU A and SKU B are slightly different, it's still the same process flowing through.
I gotcha. So you're building a system that's so versatile that can handle any iteration of your product that you can easily execute on it.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And what was interesting was we had one market segment at the paint company where it was a more of a high volume, low mix environment, but it still was a batch cycle. So it wound up being more of a low mix but high repetition process, which is a little bit different as well. And yeah, that was good learning as well. And what we figured out is, again, stay consistent with the process and then look for anywhere where you can eliminate 30 seconds in that process.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So what are some challenges you can see in that process, that just some examples for people that are in the middle of that, and maybe how you overcame at least one or two that you can remember?
Yeah, so it often all becomes about the changeover at that point. How long does it take to switch from part A to part B?
Right.
And the quicker you can create that changeover, the better. So with paint, you gotta clean everything and make sure you get rid of that contamination before you can start that next batch. And so how do you shorten that change over time in there? What tools, techniques can you use to do that? With the fasteners, it's a little bit easier to do because you just change the settings on the machine, but still your your value in the marketplace, special saws, is to not take any longer to do that changeover than what you have to. And so it's the same principle,
Sure.
just with the one example, we were starting with the basis of an hour, and with the other one, we were starting with the basis of 5 minutes. And again, how do we shave a little bit of time off of that and then compound that savings over time?
Got it. Got it. All right, so winding down a little bit now, you've shared some principles, you've shared some books. What and you even shared a mentor that you had. Um, can you think of I'll give you the option, either a book or a principle that you really live by that's really uh you know shaped you as a leader, and then why?
Yeah, and I mentioned John Maxwell earlier, and he has a quote that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that really was a good punch in the gut for me. That it starts with relationships, and if you care about people and value them for who they are and the stage that they're at, they'll do anything for you. But if you come in and try and tell them, this is how you do this better, this is how you do your job better, they'll listen. They might even comply, but you're not going to get their passion behind it. And I learned that once by screwing up, of course. I
I was the gun, the punch in the gut part.
Yeah, yeah. We were trying to solve a problem. I don't even remember the specifics. I remember there was a great team of leaders in the room, and I was younger in my tenure, and I thought a leader comes in and says, "This is what we got to figure out. Go solve it." And so I did that. I raised my voice. I got a little bit heated, and I left. And after I did that, I realized that didn't help. That didn't solve anything. They already knew that. They were already motivated to solve it. So me piling on added nothing. And from then I realized, no, sit down and solve it with them. You don't have to have the answer. You just got to figure out how to problem solve with the team. And if you do that, that will translate down then throughout the organization.
I had a similar experience, and I'll summarize it to, my team came to me, and they they taught me, and it just felt like you said, a punch in the gut. I was almost ashamed,
Yeah,
but that's what you do. You overcome, and you have the humility to learn from your experiences, and just keep moving forward and hoping to not make the same mistakes in the future.
right. Yep.
Right. Okay, so thank you so much, Scott. If people want to connect with you, learn more about you, where can they reach you? Where can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, my best suggestion would be through LinkedIn. And it's Scott.Heemstra or Scott-Heemstra at the end of that LinkedIn address there. But LinkedIn's probably the best way.
Got it. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights. We talked about culture lessons, leadership lessons, a little bit of operations, and even strategy intertwined in there. Um, if you find this conversation insightful and you want to be a part of it, please send me a note. We'll continue to be doing these conversations, so interviewing leaders and sharing their insights. And Scott, this was such an insightful conversation. Thank you so much for being a part of this, and we appreciate it. If you want to gain access or listen, we'll post it on our YouTube channel, Alphanova Consulting's YouTube channel. We'll share it on LinkedIn, and we'll tag Scott there, and hopefully you'll be able to see it as well.
All right. Thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me.
All right, take care. See you all on the next one.